earth and compassed the camp of the saints about the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. I'm going to see here, I think I had it somewhere in one of these maps where Gog and Magog may have been listed. I don't know. I know obviously if you're on the stream you won't see what I'm going to show anyway, so but I should have looked for this before I started. Um, that's Valley of Megiddo. I don't know if I've got, because I know that came up as a question last time as to what is Gog and Magog, and it's a place. And you might be able to find it if you look it up on your own. I don't know that I'm going to find it here. I can show you on a map where the Valley of Megiddo is, but I don't know that I've got Gog and Magog. In any case, we spent a good amount of time. We come through quite a bit of this information last time. One of the things that we looked at is who are these people that come against Jesus Christ at the end of the millennium. And you're going to find three different groups of people. There are people left over from the tribulation who go into the millennium unconverted. Come over to Daniel, Daniel chapter 11. Daniel chapter 11. We looked at a number of places in Zechariah. We'll look at Daniel chapter 11 here tonight. Daniel chapter 11, verse 41. Daniel 11:41. Verse 41 says, He, um, that's the Antichrist, shall enter into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand. Notice who it is. Notice who escapes out of his hand. They're not tribulation saints, okay? Um, and the land of Egypt shall not escape, but he shall have power. Let me go back here. And let's see, verse 41. Got to get back to my right spot. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and a chief of the children of Ammon. All three of those tribes are Gentile tribes. And he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries. The land of Egypt shall not escape. So the land of Egypt doesn't escape, but you get a bunch of people from Edom and Moab and the children of Ammon that do escape. So some do escape and some don't in that passage. Some people come through the tribulation and they don't take the mark of the beast. They don't get caught and killed by Antichrist, but the only reason they get through the tribulation is that they're not caught and killed. So there's going to be some folks in the tribulation that are on, as far as if you broke it down into the side of Jesus Christ and the side of the Jews or the side of the Antichrist, you're going to find some that aren't on either side. You're going to, in any massive group of people, you're always going to have somebody that remains undecided. Okay. Two, the second group of people, there are people who come through the tribulation and help the Jews. And this group you read about in Matthew 25. Come over to Matthew 25. Look at Matthew 25:34. Okay. Matthew 25:34. Now you read through a lot of Matthew and you get a lot of millennial stuff. So what he has to say here says, Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Come down to verse 40. And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. So it's people that took care of the Jews during the tribulation. 33, and he shall set the sheep on his right hand and the goats on the left. So that would be a judgment that takes place at the beginning of the millennium concerning events that took place during the tribulation. I mean, it's the throne of God. Let me come back and read it. Inasmuch you, then shall the king say to them on his right, "Come, ye blessed of the Father, inherit the kingdom." He's divided them. So you see, all those of you that I put on you on my right, come here. Does that make sense? So you've divided the nations in the sheep and goat nations, those that the people that have helped the Jews and people that didn't help the Jews. Okay, and they get an inheritance in the millennium. They get some stuff in the millennium. Miss Brenda, you had a question? Oh, okay. Matthew 25:46. Matthew 25:46. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal. These are the people who get through the tribulation, and they get through it by helping out the Jews, by not taking the mark of the beast, and by quote unquote holding out. That's where you get a lot of people. Just about every false doctrine taught in this age is a tribulational fact. And you'll hear people all over the place today say, well, I think that you got to hold out to the end. You got to hold out to the end. You just got to, and you get some people that won't get saved. Well, I can't hold out to the end. I can't hold out to the end. Nobody in this age is told to hold out to the end, right? You're kept unto the day of salvation. You're kept by the power of God. Now, does that mean that you should give up? Does that mean you should quit? Does that mean you should, whatever? You ought to believe. I believe that you have eternal security. I believe that the Bible teaches you have eternal security. People in the tribulation didn't have or won't have eternal security. So they've got to hold out to the end. Okay? They endure to the end. I believe you got to endure to the end. I believe you got to endure not in the church age you don't. Okay? Now, should you endure to the end of your life? Absolutely. Nobody's saying that you shouldn't. It's just not necessary for salvation. Your job is not to keep your salvation. He's keeping it. Right? I'm glad that my salvation there's some things that is I'm glad that they aren't locked up in my house, right? My house is you know it, it's not an impervious uh, facility, so there's some stuff that I don't keep there. I keep it in a bank, right? Well, your salvation's or your soul is the most precious thing that you have. So the key to it, the salvation of it, I wouldn't want to keep it if you asked me if I wanted to keep it. I couldn't keep it if I wanted to keep it, right? If I was holding on to it, you know who'd get a hold of it? The devil would get a hold of it. The world would get a hold of it. My flesh would mess it up. So what did you do? You entrusted your soul and your salvation to the Lord Jesus Christ, and he keeps it. He says, I've got it up here. That's where it's at. The contract is up here. I don't know why I think of this stuff. It's kind of silly to think about it. I remember, I think it was an old Little Rascals episode where, this lady, she's just about destitute. She's got all these orphan kids around, and her son, who's just a real jerk, is trying to sell her house out from underneath of her, just get whatever money because he wants to go party, and so she's just about to get kicked out of her house, and the kids in the house, they want to build a kite, and so they find some old papers that she's got in a drawer, and her eyesight's so bad she doesn't even know what the papers are, and so they want to use that for the tail of the kite as a counter, as the weight for the tail, and come to find out that they were bonds for like I don't know, AT&T or some really expensive, some stock that had really accrued or whatever, or sort of steel or something like that, and you know but that's pretty risky, right? And of course they find out that they're on the kite, and the guy and the kids, and they're all fighting over the tail, and she finally gets them and saves her house or whatever. But it just kind of goes to show that, listen, the safest place that you can have your stuff is up. You want it up. um And so these people, they get through the tribulation, they get through by helping out the Jews. The third group is that there are children born in the millennium. There's children that are born in the millennium. 1,000 years can produce a lot of kids. So you say, who all are these people that are gathering as the sands of the sea against Jesus Christ? Well, some of them are the unconverted, uncaught, and some of them might be converted, or might have been people that just made it through the tribulation, and you give them 1,000 years, and whatever they got through by helping out the Jews. That doesn't mean that they keep that opinion through the millennium. Now, maybe a bunch of them do. Maybe it's just a handful here or there. But I'm telling you that there's flesh and blood people that go into the millennium from the tribulation. So if you have to select from who are these people, this would be either the people or the descendants of these people. And some of them are going to be descendants, which you find all through the Bible. And I was just reading through it as I was looking in Joshua. Come over to the book of Joshua. You'll see it. It happens all the time, not in just these places. Let's see if I can find it here. Joshua chapter 4. Joshua chapter 4 happens all over the Old Testament, but I'll just give you the one that I've got marked right off the top of my head here. Joshua chapter 4, and they're taking the ark. They're going over Jordan. Look around Joshua chapter 4, verse 5. And Joshua said unto them, Pass over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of Jordan, and take ye up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according unto the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean ye by these stones? Go all the way over to verse 21. Verse 21, it says, And he spake unto the children of Israel, saying, When your children shall ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean ye these stones? What does that mean? It means that the Lord knew and understood that if you don't pass down what the Lord has done, if you don't tell the next generation, they won't know anything about it. And they won't feel about the Lord the same way you do. In fact, when you get to the end of the book of Joshua and into Judges, I believe it'd be Judges, probably Judges chapter 1, if not the end of Joshua. I'm trying to remember where it is exactly. Let's see, Joshua, I think 24 is the last chapter. Let's see. Yeah, Judges chapter 1, verse 1. Now, after the death of Joshua, it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, What shall we do against the Canaanite first, or fight against him? I'm trying to find the verse where it says, as long as the generations of Joshua, those that even overlap Joshua.
There's one where it's 2:10.
Is it Judges 2:10? Yeah, it Judges 2:10. And also, all that generation were gathered under their fathers, and there arose another generation after them which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. Meaning that, and that happens a number of times, is that everybody behaves themselves for as long as that patriarch is alive, and everybody who knew him, right? Is everybody who knew Joshua, as long as they were alive. But whenever those kids come up that were born after Joshua was long gone, and all those folks that knew Joshua were long gone. Let's see. Chapter 2:19. It came to pass when the judge was dead, that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers, in following other gods to serve them, to bow down to them. They ceased not from their own doings, nor from the stubborn way. Well, all of that goes to basically just the same concept as this, is that it's not it's it's not outside the pattern of human history that if you went into the millennium and had people born in the millennium that didn't remember the tribulation, and didn't remember the battle of Armageddon, and doesn't remember what the Lord did for them in saving them, right? Because they're still flesh and blood born people, and in 1,000 years, you and I really don't have any concept of what 1,000 years is, right? Maybe everything goes really good for the first 750 years. In the last 250 years, that's enough time to produce enough people as the saints of the seed, especially when nobody's dying of disease, nobody's dying of hunger, nobody's dying of old age, right? You get people as the saints of the seed in 250 years. Listen, your country right now is less than 250 years old. Just give it to it. You say everything goes great for 750 years. in the last 250, it can go bad enough to produce everything that you see in Revelation chapter 20. Go ahead. Right. Yeah, I mean, you're squarely in the gleanings as far as, and that can be hard to, I mean, I think that's important for anybody in the ministry or in church to understand. And that doesn't mean that you don't try to witness and you don't try to get people to church and all that other kinds of, just ho hum, we just don't have many numbers because we're not going to have very many numbers, blah, 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 blah. But it is going to be harder. It's going to be tougher. And you've heard me kind of tell this story before, but there was, back whenever I was a kid, I thought it was, seemed like punishment, but uh, we had a cornfield not far from the house when we lived over there on the corner of W and H, over in Schuyler County. Dad was trying to farm, and so we had they harvested the corn crop, and I don't know if it was just a known problem that we had with the combine or what, but there were several ears left on the ground. And I don't know if they're just like, you guys need to get out of the house and go do something. But they sent us across the road over there with a four-wheeler and a little cart. And we went down row after row after row, picking up uh, any full stalk, any full corn cob, any full ear that we could find, and put it in the back of that wagon. And when it got full, we drove it on back to the house. And there was a cattle waterer, and we filled that thing up. Now, I'm just going to tell you that if you keep at it, you can fill that cattle waterer. Years ago, it might have filled up, just like that combine would have filled it right on up, but here we are. Guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to go down row by row, and you're going to have to bend down and look and pick them up. Now, the worst part of that story was they didn't do anything with all that, and the mice ate it all. I was like, well, what a waste. I thought we were doing this for a purpose. But but yeah, yeah, there's an illustration that goes on there. You better do something with the ones that you pick up. I Yeah, firmly. Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating than the effort gone to waste, right? And so as Christians, man, don't waste the effort, right? I think there was a quote put up on the board this last week because I think it was Bob Jones Sr. quotes that it's a sin to do less than your best, and you ought to do something, and some of that's outside of our control, right? A kid gets saved at Vacation Bible School, and you try as much as you can, but you don't get to pick if their parents will bring them to church. You don't get to go and kidnap kids just to bring them to church. The funny thing about it is, one little boy, and Sharon would know him, but I mean, I don't know if Eliza is sweet on this boy or what, but she is on his case. And she told us before we went into Thanksgiving break, she said, and gave his name. She said, I gave him some instructions that he was supposed to read so many chapters of his Bible. And when we got back from Thanksgiving break, I wanted him to tell me what he read. And if he couldn't tell me what he read, then he needed to tell me at least a Bible story that he knew.
Is this the same little boy that she got upset because of the things in his front yard?
It may be. Yeah, yeah, probably. I mean, she is, yeah, she is trying to disciple this little boy.
Tell her to keep it up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, you couldn't get her to back down if you wanted to. I think he would sure wish it if she would let up a little bit, but she won't let up on him. So, it's, so it's something else. But but she's trying. There you got a 9-year-old little girl trying to disciple, trying, somebody that she didn't win to Christ, but she wants to see somebody do something. Anyway, so if we come over to, I gave you this point that there are going to be kids that are born in the millennium, and they're going to grow up with an old Adamic nature, and I mean, there's a different set of rules in the millennium. It's all works in the millennium. You can literally see the lake of fire in the millennium, and people are getting hauled off into the lake of fire in the millennium, which is interesting. I'll give you a little thing here. Um, you've seen me draw the shape of the universe before, with the lake of fire down here and the throne of God up here. What's interesting is that that picture matches what astrophysicists say the universe looks like, except they draw it on its side. And they say, well, the beginning is up here and everything is moving this direction and everything is moving out and everything is moving this way. And I think they're right. They just don't realize because they can't see what's at the end of it. In fact, they have a name for it. It's called the Great Attractor. They think that whatever is over here is pulling everything towards it. They're wrong. There is propulsion, but it's not attraction by the lake of fire. The propulsion system is sin. You started out all the way up here. That's where you started out. And we have been moving this direction. And by the time you get to the millennium, you're going to be right there at the edge of the universe looking at the lake of fire. You're going to be able to see it. Huh? Take that how you will. I mean, they're wrong though. It's not just global; it's universal warming. The funny thing is that they say the whole thing ends in heat death, but that's not the problem. The problem isn't a lack of heat. The problem is it's going to get real hot. Now you're going to be down there for 1,000 years, but in any case, Isaiah chapter 65 verse 20. I think I had you turn over there, didn't I? Isaiah 65:20. I don't know if that's a foreign concept, but it's something I don't know if I got it from somewhere else, or I doubt it's an original thought, but I think that sin impacts a great number of things. I think it impacts the creation that you exist on, and that things are getting worse and worse and worse as a result of the sin of humanity. And I also think that that's what's pushing everything forward. As sin increases, things increase, things speed up. Isaiah 65, verse 20 says, there shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days, for the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. So you see that thing literally in the millennium, that somebody that sin in the millennium will age a person, right? There shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days, for the child shall die 100 years old. If somebody dies at 100 years old, you say, man, they're just a kid, just a little child. Doesn't mean that they can't die, but they're not going to die of, I guess, what you'd call natural causes, not because of disease. But, I mean, accidents happen even in the millennium. Somebody can get hurt. Okay. Notice there, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. All right. Let's see. Go over to Zechariah 8. Zechariah 8, verse 4. You call him now, you call him a whippersnapper. Zechariah 8, verse 4, it says, thus saith the Lord of hosts, there shall yet old men and old women dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, and every man with his staff in his hand, for very age, and the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets thereof. So the millennium, when one dies who's 100 years old, he's considered to be a child. And that means that a baby's about 20 years old, and a small child's about 70 years old, and a child's about 100 years old, and a young man's about 150 years old. A full-grown man's about 200, and an old man's about 300 to 400 years old. The longevity of life will be as it was before the flood, and so there's going to be the years will be stretched out as it was in the time between Adam and Noah. Now, exactly what that means, I don't know. I don't know if it means just as a matter of perspective. I don't know if you age normally until you get to about 33, and then that is stretched out till you get to about 400, and then you start to show your years a little bit, or if the entire lifespan is stretched out. I'd like to go towards the former because it's hard to imagine as a parent um, that raising a baby for 20 years. But today, moms today probably feel that way. You got most of what I see today. It used to be that let's say in the uh, 1800s, that a boy was considered a man by the time he was 14, right? He was grown. And then as you became more modern, you got into the 1900s, and a boy became a man at about 20. And you got about to the 1950s, 1960s, and then maybe a boy didn't become a man till he was, 25, 30. Now you're in the 2020s, and you got guys that are 40 years old and they're not men yet. They're still living in mom's basement and playing games and, just children, just infantile as far as their understanding and mentality goes. So, I don't know that it's all physical. So, yeah, I think some of it's just a matter of perspective. When you get to, I think now being in my later 30s, when I meet somebody who's, in their lower 20s, I'm like, well, it's just a kid, you know? And some of you older than me probably feel that way. The older you get, the younger everybody else gets, right? I mean, long gone are the days where I looked at professional athletes as being my peers if I ever met them. Now they're all, I mean, the old guys in the NFL, I'm older than most of the old guys in the NFL. I think maybe Aaron Rodgers is older than me, but not many more than that. Um, So, so the three kinds of people at the end of the millennium who furnish the material for the devil to work with, that's people who get through the tribulation neutral, or their children, or their grandchildren, or their great, 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 great grandchildren. Two, people who treat the Jew right and get through the tribulation without taking the mark of the beast, and their children, or grandchildren, or great, 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 great grandchildren. Or three, the children or grandchildren from these two groups who are born in the millennium. So you have flesh and blood, Adamic state people living and serving and resenting and dying in the millennium. You got normal, everyday flesh and blood, Adamic people. So I think that at least hopefully answers that question. Is it 100% wipeout at the end with the Battle of Armageddon? No, it's not. But with the devil removed, with nature regenerated, with no war, with no wild animals, there's going to be more than twice as many people on earth at the end of 1,000 years. Going to be a lot of folks. And especially as there are today, you got 8 billion people on the earth today. Now, with the tribulation being what it is, with the rapture taking a bunch of people out, people that die as a result of the rapture, the events of um, just things that would kill people off during the tribulation. You've got, you've got the water being turned to blood, you got all the pestilence, you got all the disease, you got war, you got all that, and then you got the Battle of Armageddon. You're only going to be left with maybe a third of what you have today. So one third of eight. So, what would that be? 2 point something billion people on the planet. Somewhere in there, a little over 2 billion people. Right? Probably 2.5. There's the math teacher. I don't know. 8 divided by 3. Give you an approximate number there. So you're starting off with a much lower number, and then probably lower than that by the time you get to the end of the Battle of Armageddon. But that number is going to ramp up pretty quickly whenever you have a perfect state. Okay. Um, 2,500,000,000 people are going to be killed during the tribulation. There'll be more people killed during the tribulation than were killed in the Revolutionary War, Civil War, War of 1812, the Hundred Years' War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan combined. That's there's going to be more death and destruction in the tribulation than anybody's going to have time to bury bodies with. That's why you see all the cormorants and all the birds and all that other kind of stuff cleaning up the whole mess. And yet, with all these people wiped out, with half of those left going to hell at the second coming of Christ at the end of the millennium, there's going to be more than twice the population on the earth today at the end of the millennium. And that's because there's going to be 1,000 years without any war, without any disease to speak of, and without any of the pressure which Satan can bring to bear to aggravate man's sinful condition. So you can see why Satan has a multitude waiting for him at the end of the millennium. There's just a bunch of people. There's a bunch of people to pick from. And I've often thought about that, not necessarily about what it's like at the end of the millennium, but what it was like before the flood. Because you got a pretty decent earth going on up before the flood. You've got Noah living to be 900 some years old, and most people living to be that old. I don't think that mankind um, bore much resemblance then to what we think of it. I think if you got people living to be 900 years old, that any advancement that was made is going to accelerate. And so I think whenever you look at things like the Tower of Babel, I don't think they were, this isn't mud and brick and, making a thing. I don't think it was the Burj Khalifa. I think they were building a rocket. I think they were going to get off the planet. I don't think the Lord's worried about tall buildings. I think he's worried about somebody working with somebody with more information than what mankind has got today to figure out how to get to heaven, because that's what concerned the Lord. The AI stuff is interesting. The AI stuff is very, very interesting as far as the implication goes on a lot of that, especially when you combine AI, general AI, um, and then you start throwing in other components like Neuralink and being able to link to that AI. I think that I might be wrong. This is just my speculation. So I'm kind of going off the rails a little bit here. But I think that if you've got, right now, it's not that smart, but it's as dumb now as it will ever be. It is getting smarter every day. It is getting more capable every day at an accelerated exponential rate. I just watched a thing in the news today that Google just came out with a quantum computing chip that can solve an algorithm in days that would take a normal computer 7 septillion years to solve. Not just not like your laptop. It would take a supercomputer 7 septillion years to solve that same algorithm. And this quantum computer running on this chip can do it in a matter of days. That's as bad as that will ever get. And you get talking about superconductive materials, where if they can get that quantum computer to be able to run at room temperature, you are off to the races. And when you match that, you partner that thing with general artificial intelligence, and then you connect your brain to it. I think that you'll get to the point, if that thing is under the control of the Antichrist, the reason that somebody takes the mark of the beast, cannot be saved, is because it overwrites that person's thoughts in a way that you wouldn't know what your thoughts were. You hook yourself up to a computer that is a super intelligence, and that super intelligence says the Antichrist is God. You're not ever going to be able to convince somebody, even if you pulled it out of them. Is that, I mean, I don't know. I just start watching this stuff, and maybe it makes me a little bit Looney Tunes, but you watch enough of this stuff and you start seeing different the technological advancements, and they start coming together. And if you've got an open Bible, you can start to see where some of these puzzle pieces fit. Anyway. Yeah, 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 yeah. So it's and to have somebody say, well, we're still a long ways off. That's if you're looking at a linear curve, right? And say, technology is advancing like this. It's not advancing like that. It's advancing with an exponential curve, meaning that by the end of next year, the world that you recognize today could be drastically different. The end of 2025 could be drastically different than the end of 2024 and what you can do.
Horizon person that took care of me last time said that in Brazil, they're doing, they're making a picture of your child and showing just like 3 seconds of it, of them saying, I need help, grandma, give me money, but it looks like your grandchild.
Yeah.
And it's enough, it's AI enough that because it's so real that it's your child, AI, saying and talking and sounding just like your grandchild or your child.
I watched a deal. It's called Sora, but what they're able to do right now is they can take a picture, say like an old 1800s picture of Abraham Lincoln, and give that picture to AI, and it will turn that picture into video, and they'll have Abraham Lincoln get up out of that chair and walk around. And it looks like it's from it looks like you're watching a video. So it is an expert at lying. So
your thoughts of like what you guys say, unless they
yeah,
recorded it.
It's a wild tool. And in the wrong hands,